So ladies and gentlemen, my name is Sharon Whiteman, and I'm part of the leadership team at the Lyme Disease Association of Australia. And we're dedicated to doing our best to support those sick with Lyme and associated disease in Australia. And as we know, the situation is very dire. And our guest today, Dr. Bill Rawls, offers a real ray of hope for everyone who's sick and disenfranchised here in this country. Give you a little bit about his background. Dr. Bill Rawls graduated from Bowman Gray School of Medicine at Wake Forest University in 1985. He holds his medical license in North Carolina. With the lived experience of overcoming chronic illness himself, Dr. Rawls found himself forced to look for solutions outside of modern medicine. After integrating dietary changes and herbal remedies, Dr. Rawls was on the road to recover, and then he was bit by a tick. All of the symptoms he had been experiencing for years came back in full force, and a Lyme test was strongly positive. He discovered a protocol for using medicinal herbs in massive doses to combat Lyme disease. Everyone thought he was crazy, but with a leap of faith, he committed and he got better. Within 3 months, he felt human again. By 6 months, life seemed normal once more. Dr. Rawls has gone on to write extensively on health topics, including Lyme disease, fibromyalgia, and chronic immune dysfunction. He's the author of Suffered Long Enough and Unlocking Lyme, and has contributed to many, many health sites. Aside from his writing, Dr. Rawls serves as the medical director for Vital Plan, which is a herbal supplement and wellness company he co-founded with his daughter, Braden. Together, they seek to empower people with education, resources, and potent herbal blends to enable the take back control, supporting a direct path to better health and recovery. So, Dr. Rawls, thank you very much for giving Australia some of your time tonight.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you for asking me.
I'm quite excited about this, actually. So let's go back to that story that I outlined briefly. You start with medicine and the passion that drives us. Just describe that for us.
Well, medicine was in my family, and I dabbled with other potential careers and ended up coming back and going to medical school, and gravitated toward obstetrics and gynecology because it was more the wellness and progressive side of medicine. It didn't deal with chronic illness. The interventions were acute and people typically got well. The downside of that in a small town at the time was that I had to take a hospital call, 24-hour call in the hospital every second to third day, along with a busy practice. And didn't mean I had to stay in the hospital, but I could be called at any time, and typically I was. And really lived a life of being totally sleep deprived and chronically stressed, of working a lot harder than I needed to be. Probably not the best health habits on top of that, just because time didn't allow it. 15 or 20 years, that caught up with me. At age 47, I started having a wide range of symptoms that I first identified as fibromyalgia. Nobody wants that diagnosis. I tried Lyme tests because trying to get beyond that, and they were negative. Did have another tick bite that alerted me to the possibility of a tick-borne illness because I did have a relapse of symptoms. By then I'd been working on my health habits. I ended up having to stop doing obstetrics to get rid of the call. And had a positive test, but even then, it's questionable what a positive test was. At that point in time, not really anybody was checking for co-infections. And I thought, hey, this is it. I take antibiotics, I get well. And I actually got sicker instead of getting well. And I was back to square one and chasing this diagnosis of finding that chronic Lyme disease, which I identified with because my symptoms had been going on for so long, wasn't even recognized by the medical establishment. It was worse than fibromyalgia. Ended up, as you said, doing herbal therapy without high expectations in the beginning, but just desperate. I was still having to practice medicine, cover a practice, but by then income was significantly restrained because I was having to do such limited hours. And yeah, I started getting my life back, and I haven't looked back. And I've spent the past 20, that was like 2005. So I've spent the past almost 20 years trying to figure out, why did the herbs work and why did I have such an extraordinary recovery? But it wasn't just, hey, I did this thing and everything was great and my life was wonderful and left it behind. It was ups and downs for years. It actually took about 5 years for all the symptoms to go away, which were numerous. Heart symptoms, neurological symptoms, my joints were falling apart. I mean, everything. And everything got better, but every time I went off the herbs, say every time some stress would come along, I would start to relapse again. I finally just stayed on the herbs, and I've been taking herbs continually for 15 years.
Mhm.
And I've come to a total different understanding of what chronic Lyme disease is. And and it really is a window to understand all chronic illness, not just Lyme disease, autoimmune, fibromyalgia, Parkinson's, dementia, everything. There are very close connections. And it changed my life. And I've been studying the research, putting the pieces together, understanding this thing ever since. And it's been a fascinating journey.
Sounds amazing, actually. And so, I mean, it makes sense why you gravitated towards specializing in Lyme disease, but maybe expand on your thoughts that all chronic illnesses have a commonality about them. And I think that's going to be unique for our listeners today.
It is, yeah. People with chronic Lyme disease are used to being marginalized. And what I would say is there are a lot of people that are marginalized out there. And anybody that becomes identified as having a chronic illness and ultimately a diagnosis, the capacity of the medical system to restore them back to normal health is extremely limited. And the problem is, in medicine, we treat the processes and we treat things in the same way that we would do acute intervention. When you look at our medical system, we do a great job with acute intervention.
Mm.
You get a bad influenza and need to be hospitalized, you get a heart attack, you get a stroke, you break your leg. We're going to do a great job of that. But as far as the day-to-day management of chronic illness, what drugs do is block manifestations of illness, symptoms, other manifestations. And that can slow progression of illness, but it never gets people well. So part of my journey, starting out way back in 2005, I was starting to ask that question, what causes chronic illness? And I think any person with chronic Lyme disease would say, oh, it's the microbes. And I would say, no, less than you think, less than you think. They're part of it. But so when we talk about it, I like to shift people's thinking to really thinking about our body differently than we do. We tend to think about it as a whole. We compartmentalize things in our medical system. We have pulmonologists and cardiologists and rheumatologists, and so we block everything up. But if you look at the smallest functional unit of our body, it's a living cell. So our body is a composite of literally trillions and trillions of living cells. Everything that happens in our body, whether it's thyroid hormone being produced, bones and ligaments being knitted together after an injury, heart beating, doesn't matter. It's all cellular. So everything that happens in the body is cellular. If we are well, it's because our cells are well. If we are sick, it means our cells are stressed. And typically the symptom will point to the cells being stressed. If you have heart symptoms, that's heart cells being stressed. Neurological, nerve cells, brain cells. Slip and twist your ankle, cells in your ankle. When we talk about more general symptoms like fatigue or just not feeling well, that's cell stress throughout the body. So that really simplifies the equation. If you want to be healthy, your cells have to be healthy. All cells need 5 basic things. That's it. You do these 5 things, and your cells are going to be healthy. Your cells need the right nutrients. They need a clean environment that's free of unnatural and not natural toxic substances such as mold. They need downtime, relief of stress and sleep. They need good blood flow, chiefly from movement, to wash away built up toxic waste that builds up around our cells. And the last thing is they need protection from microbes. And microbes is a big one. So framing it, when you look at illness from the point of view of cellular stress, the obvious solution is reduce the stress and cells can recover. So every one of our cells has the ability to recover and regenerate after being stressed or injured, as long as the stress isn't catastrophic. It doesn't wipe out all the cells. So our cells, our ability to heal is about the ability of cells in the body to regenerate. So that's kind of a basic, it's a different way of looking at chronic illness from the point of view of cellular, and looking at recovery from the point of view of reducing cellular stress to allow recovery. So I think that's that's a way to frame it. And then if you want to talk about that microbe factor, which is really big, we can go into that too, if you like.
That would be great. So, because people will be going, well, how can I tell if my cells are cleansed or if they, I'm flushing them well enough? And so I'm just going to listen.
Yeah. Well, because you have symptoms. It's as simple as that. We do all this elaborate testing, and what I've found over the years is our testing is really lousy. We don't do a very good job with testing. You have to be really sick for most tests to actually be accurate. And tests that measure things like vitamin levels and things like that are notoriously inaccurate. Your cells, though, will talk to you if you listen. And that's what symptoms are. When cells are stressed or injured, cells release substances that activate nerves to tell your brain something's wrong. But when cells are stressed or injured, the other component of that is they lose function. So things don't work as well. And when that is affecting enough cells in the body, communications start breaking down, and we start having all these crazy symptoms of chronic illness that are happening throughout the body. So when you look at chronic illness, it's multiple stress factors going on all at once that are affecting everything in the body. And that sets the stage for the microbe factor. So we can dive into a little bit about Lyme microbes and how that is compared to everything else that we get too, if you like.
That'd be great. Thank you.
All right. So microbes, what do they want from us? They want food and a platform to spread to other hosts. So everything has purpose. There are a lot of microbes in the world. Bacteria, viruses, protozoa, and yeast, they don't bother us because they're not really equipped to invade our body and try to set up shop. But everything has to eat, and all living things are food for something else. Our body, our cells are food for microbes. That's why they want to infect us. And they have a lot of different strategies for doing that. So microbes are constantly trying to get inside of our body. So an infection is when a microbe enters the body for the first time. But that's happening, and it's happening a lot of times when we don't know it. So you actually have, we talk about the immune system a lot, but you actually have 4 levels of defense against microbes. So your first level of defense is barriers. Your skin, the linings of your lungs, the linings of your nasal passageways and sinuses and body openings, and the lining of the GI tract is designed to keep food and microbes in. So barriers keep microbes out, moisture in. That's their purpose. But microbes are constantly finding ways across barriers. So the lungs are pretty very vulnerable. So a lot of microbes specialize in riding in on air droplets and invading the lungs. A lot of the respiratory symptoms we have are just the microbe trying to cross that barrier. Now, biting insects, flies, fleas, ticks, mosquitoes, anything that bites us and draws blood crosses that skin barrier. So a lot of microbes actually use that as a pathway to get inside the body. So whether they come in by the lungs or sexual contact or through food or through a tick bite, all microbes want the same thing. They want to get to the bloodstream because the bloodstream is the highway to all cells in the body. So that's what they're trying to do, is get to the bloodstream. So when you look at tick-borne microbes, it is true that some ticks carry Lyme disease and other ticks don't carry Lyme disease, but all ticks carry microbes. They found that one species of microbe of tick carries 237 different families of bacteria. So this thing that only certain ticks are an issue is just dead wrong. So you think about it, 50 years ago, we didn't know about Borrelia. It had not been classified. Does that mean people weren't getting bitten by ticks and having tick-borne microbes? No, they were getting them. We just hadn't identified it. So we identified that one, just one, Borrelia burgdorferi, they called it. And over time, they found that there were more species of Borrelia. And you actually found Borrelia and ticks all around the world, Australia, everywhere else. And they ultimately, so when I wrote my book, Unlocking Lyme in 2017, they had found that there were 12 species of Borrelia. That's up to 21 now. And then about 10 years ago, they started finding, whoa, people aren't just carrying Borrelia. They're carrying other tick-borne microbes like Anaplasma and Babesia, and then they pick up these things like Bartonella and all of this other stuff. So what we're testing for is just scratching the surface. It's just what we know now. But quite frankly, my list of potential things that we could get is well over 100, and I think that's just scratching the surface. I don't even do testing anymore because I think, frankly, it's misleading in most cases. This idea of we need to test for the microbe so we can target the microbe and kill it so you can get well is a myth. It doesn't work that way. So testing, for the sake of knowing more, it's great for that. For the sake of helping people get well, doesn't really help all that much, quite frankly, in most cases. Because there's so much more there that we don't know about. And again, we're just scratching the surface. The thing about it is, all these things we're talking about, Borrelia, Bartonella, Babesia, they're all low-grade pathogens. They're low-grade. But where they make up for it is with stealth, all right? So your second level of defense, when something hits the bloodstream, is your immune system. Your immune system is protection for the things that do make it across those barriers. It's there. So you've got immune cells that are patrolling throughout the body. And things are constantly leaking across, most of the time of which you just don't even know about. So when something hits the bloodstream, it's less about the microbe and more about whether we have built-in immunity to the microbe that matters, all right? And that is a function of what your ancient ancestors were exposed to. Ebola virus is a horrible pathogen because humans have never been exposed to it. We have no built-in immunity to it whatsoever. When it hits the bloodstream, there's nothing to stop it, and it ravages cells throughout the body. Mortality is 60%. SARS virus that caused COVID, the mortality is only about 1%. And that's because there are a lot of other coronaviruses somewhat like it that are circulating in human populations. So this new one that came from an animal, they're not even sure what yet, or if you like the lab theory that, that, but it wasn't that much different. So it wasn't as bad as it could have been. It wasn't nearly as bad as some of the previous SARS epidemics, but it was a lot lower than Ebola virus, all right? Mortality associated with acute Lyme disease is virtually zero. People don't die of complications of Lyme disease, but people don't get acutely ill from Lyme disease. In fact, the vast majority of people that I talk to, I've talked to literally thousands of people that have chronic Lyme disease, and 95% of them do not remember getting sick around the time of a tick bite, or even remember the tick bite in most cases. So what that tells you is this is a low-grade pathogen. And what that means is when it hits the bloodstream, the immune system is on it. It's mopping these microbes up as fast as it can. But this thing is stealthy. Its motive is not to make you deathly ill. Its motive is to persist in your body and wait for an opportunity to spread to another host. That's all it cares about. And that's true with all the tick-borne microbes. So when you look at built-in immunity, humans, your great ancestors, as far back as we can go, were being bitten by ticks, carrying Borrelia, and all of these other microbes. So we do have built-in immunity, pretty good immunity. But so when these things get in the system, the immune system is mopping it up. But these things have the ability to do something that they've labeled the Trojan horse mechanism, that they can stay alive inside the white blood cell. And they use the white blood cell as a vehicle to cross over into the brain and to tissues throughout the body. Turns out a lot of microbes use this Trojan horse mechanism to travel. COVID, SARS virus, it's been documented. Influenza, all the tick-borne microbes, they all use it. In fact, just about everything does. Because the most successful microbes don't kill their host or make their host deadly sick. They have the ability to persist inside the host body. So what they want is to get to your cells. And all of these things are intracellular. They invade cells. They invade cells of the brain, the heart, and the joints, and everywhere in the body. That's your third level of defense. Your third level of defense is your cells can defend themselves. Your cells have mechanisms called autophagy that they actually use to rebuild as part of the regeneration process. Well, as part of that, they can spit out microbes. So it's an interesting dynamic that we have that as part of our defense mechanism. But what's been discovered really within only the past 5 years to the decade is that lots of microbes use another strategy, and that is they go dormant. So they can invade cells, and if conditions are hostile, the cell is active, and they can't use the cell as a food source, they just go dormant. And that is the key to understanding not only chronic Lyme disease, but autoimmune illness and every single chronic illness. Because these things are becoming dormant inside our cells keep right on working like they weren't even there. Cells in our brain, cells in our heart, cells in our joints, everywhere in the body. So what was happening to me when I was a kid out playing and getting tick bites every single day is I was getting seeded. My cells were getting seeded with these microbes. But guess what? It's not just ticks. You have things trickling over from your gut, from your skin, from lots of different things that you're exposed to. Epstein-Barr virus and scores of other viruses, things that we're just starting to understand can become dormant in your tissues. And it's being called the dormant blood and tissue microbiome. And there's a lot of interest in studying this thing. And, Lyme disease, chronic Lyme disease is a perfect model for it. So you can have this, you collect these things your whole life. Some are probably worse than others. If you go through life and don't get Borrelia, Bartonella, Babesia, some of these other things, you're probably better off. But they can be dormant in your tissues. And then other factors come along. You get stressed, you're chronically exposed to mold, or you're not getting sleep like I was, or you've had a lot of stress just for work and life stress and all these factors, or you were in an automobile accident and ended up in the hospital, or sometimes another infection like COVID or another tick-borne illness comes along and it's enough to tick the balance. So when that happens, these microbes start emerging from your cells. And your immune system sees this, and now your immune system is working against you because it sees all these microbes emerging from your cells, and it starts attacking your cells. That's what autoimmunity is. And I don't think you can explain autoimmunity without considering that factor. So autoimmunity has been documented for Lyme disease and every other chronic illness. Now, you have to, get certain parameters to be defined as an autoimmune illness, but we all have some degree of autoimmunity, and autoimmunity is part of every chronic illness. So it certainly supports this theory of dormant microbes being reactivated, which comes to your fourth level of defense. So some microbes in your body are actually working for you. Normal flora in your gut and on your skin are very important for keeping pathogens suppressed in those areas. So anything that disrupts your normal flora allows pathogens to flourish. Antibiotics, bad diet, chronic stress, a lot of factors. So your normal flora are really important. So long-term antibiotic therapy suppresses normal flora, and it hits your normal flora a whole lot harder than it hits the dormant microbes in your tissues. So when you do that over and over again, you destroy your normal flora. There was actually a study in 2017 that showed that we all have a trickle of pathogens that come across from our gut, cross that gut blood barrier and end up in the bloodstream. And that's happening to all of us all the time. When you create dysbiosis from bad food or antibiotics, that trickle becomes a flood. So you not only have Lyme microbes to deal with, you've got all these pathogens from your gut that are now in your brain and your heart and all the tissues in your body. So looking at this illness from that point of view really changes how you must look at recovery. So interesting story, well backed by science. I've spent the past 15 years researching this. All the science is there. And I've documented in my most recent book, The Cellular Wellness Solution, because I think this is really important for everybody to understand.
Yeah, health starts at the cell level, doesn't it? And so how do you help your patients or those that follow your protocols know where to start?
Yeah, it's you start by looking at those 5 categories of what your cells need, all right? And they need the right nutrients, a clean environment, downtime, sleep, moving blood through exercise, or for people who can exercise, sauna, and then protection from the microbes. So again, I'm starting to call these things reactivation syndromes. And whether you're talking about fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue, autoimmune, Parkinson's, dementia, any chronic illness, including chronic Lyme disease, it's reactivation of dormant microbes. You are not going to eradicate the dormant microbes. And the studies that are being done are showing that it's not a few microbes, it's literally hundreds and hundreds of different things. So we're still in our infancy as far as studying that, but knowing what's a pathogen, what's not a pathogen. There's speculation that some dormant microbes actually may help our cells function. There may be some symbiosis there. So there's still a lot to learn, but the fact of the matter is it is something that we have to pay attention to. And so moving forward, I look at those parameters, and there's no special order. I mean, we need to eat a better diet. We need to clean up our environment, and certainly if there's mold in the environment, you got to clean up the environment or leave that environment, one of the two. If there are other toxins or any amount of toxins, so cleaning up air and food and water is really important as part of that recovery. Sleep is a difficult one for a lot of people, so working with people to improve that sleep equation. Movement, they say exercise is a hammer that crushes everything else. If you can exercise, you're going to be great. That's true to a certain extent, but what I found is if your whole body's inflamed, it's hard to move. I mean, it just hurts to move. And I used in my recovery sauna, and I recommend that for a lot of people because it's really important to move blood. The first step in detoxification is flushing the spaces around the cells to clear up debris, congestion, dead cells, dead microbes, and getting that mobilized and clearing out the lymph system. And the way to do that is move blood. And sauna moves blood without causing friction. So it's a really good addition that can help people a lot. The herbal therapy is to me, a cornerstone, or should be a cornerstone in any recovery. And here's the difference, and here's why it's so important. When you look at an antibiotic, all antibiotics come from a natural source. They either come from a plant, a fungus, or a bacteria, because all organisms have to have a defense system against microbes. All things living are food for something else. So, we all need defenses. But when they take an antibiotic, what they're doing is pulling one single chemical from that organism's defense system. And then they potentiate that in a laboratory to make it more potent. It's really good for killing fast-growing bacteria. Somebody has a pneumococcal pneumonia, the bacteria are turning over every 20 minutes. Yes, intravenous antibiotics or oral antibiotics, depending on the case, that's the right choice. That's the right choice because those are very fast-growing bacteria. So you're going to hit those bacteria a lot harder than you're going to hit the normal flora. But there's a time limit. You go over 10 days and you're going to start eating away at your normal flora. In most cases, though, most acute infections with fast-growing bacteria are solved fairly rapidly. The problem is that antibiotics used to kill these dormant microbes or reactivation, they're not growing as fast. They're turning over every 12 hours. So you're actually hitting your normal flora harder than you are the antibiotic. So that's the limiting factor. So using months and months and months of antibiotics, some people get well, but most people just trash their gut and end up with lifetime problems because of it, and set themselves up for all kinds of other infections or problems. They may suppress the microbes in their system, but they're going to set up a lot of other issues. Some people get past that, but I just have talked to way, way too many people that have actually been harmed by that. Mm-hmm. So when we're using an herb, we're not using a single chemical. We're using the plant's entire defense system, which entails hundreds or even thousands of different chemicals. But it's not a random killer. It is a defense system that has a certain amount of intelligence behind it. So all plants have to defend their cells from being invaded by bacteria, viruses, protozoa, yeast, just like we do. So this defense system, they're using a chemical defense system instead of a cellular defense system. And when we take that, we're getting the use of that whole system. Now, the interesting thing is there's a certain intelligence about it that When you take an herb, it's selective for pathogens, but doesn't disrupt your normal flora. And that is fascinating. So, when I went into this thing, antibiotics just trashed my gut every time I tried them. And I had the same expectations for herbs. I thought, if these things are actually killing bacteria, they're going to trash my gut. They didn't. They actually made my gut better. And I actually pulled a study for my last book. I found that somebody had actually studied this and proved that using herbs actually promotes growth of normal flora and suppresses growth of pathogens. So it makes it an ideal tool because it is a long-term battle. You're not going to kill these things or get rid of them or put them back in their box and keep them dormant in a few weeks or even a few months or sometimes even in a few years. And they're always going to be there waiting for an opportunity to reactivate. So long-term suppression, giving your immune system that extra boost is really important. And using different herbs compounds the coverage that you get. So when you take an herb, you're getting whatever chemistry that plant is producing to deal with stress factors in its natural environment, whatever microbes are there. When you take multiple herbs, you're getting overlapping benefit that is wider. Now, all herbs are going to have activity against a wide range of bacteria, viruses, protozoa, yeast. This is true of all of them. But some herbs have stronger antimicrobial properties. And ones that we actually are using for Lyme disease, as many of them are actually been studied. There was a study in Johns Hopkins a couple of years ago that they actually looked to see if the herbs actually were killing the bacteria. It's a big question that everybody had. So they did a test tube study, or in a petri dish with Borrelia, and they found that some of our commonly used herbs like Japanese knotweed, Chinese skullcap, cat's claw, actually were superior to doxycycline and one of the cephalosporins that's commonly used. They actually killed the bacteria better. So they're killing the pathogens, not killing our normal flora. So you can use them for months or even years. And, I'm trying to make a case that really everybody ought to be on some herbs for their whole lifetime.
Wow.
But the herbs have such a great safety profile. They don't have drug-like effects. They have a very low incidence of side effects and adverse reactions. There are a lot of different herbs that you can use. Many of them have been studied for this properties, but I don't limit them to Lyme disease. I mean, anybody who wants to overcome chronic illness or just stay healthy, I think herbs should be a cornerstone of that recovery. Because the herbs are doing a lot more than just killing reactivated microbes. They're also really wonderful cell protectants. They're protecting our cells from the things that stress our cells: free radicals, radiation, toxic substances, eating too much glucose even. Most herbs have anti-diabetic effects. So all these stress factors. So whatever you're doing with diet or any of your lifestyle, the herbs are compounding that. And so whatever you're doing, they're going to make it a whole lot easier. And the fact that we can use these things long term makes them really wonderful. It makes, it is the perfect solution for this problem as I've come to understand it. And I think that's really important for people to understand, because the barrier to using herbs, you don't need a doctor's prescription for that. You just need enough knowledge and access to the herbs. It's really all you need. And the potential for harm is so low, the question more becomes, why would you not do that? And are absolutely everyone cured by herbs? Yeah, probably not, but a high percentage. The work that we've done in following people for the past 7 years, about 70% of people have significant reduction in symptoms within 6 months. There's nothing that works that well, and certainly nothing that has that low potential to cause harm.
Wow.
So it can be quite powerful. The use of herbs, a smart diet, just good health practices as far as sleep, and doing things that actually promote cellular wellness, like sauna. There's some evidence that red light therapy can do that. So there are some smart things that you can do, and most of them have low barriers. You just don't need prescriptions or a whole lot of knowledge to use these things. And it puts recovery from these kinds of illnesses in people's hands. And but it's not just true for Lyme disease. When I was researching my last book, I actually came upon an article in a medical journal that they had evaluated what it takes to overcome chronic illness. And what they found was it was 90% what the person does for themselves, and only 10% what is done to them, i.e. medicines or medical therapies. So it's mostly what people do. And a lot of people with chronic Lyme disease, they're on their way to being much sicker, eventually ending up with Parkinson's and dementia, because all of these microbes have been associated with these things. But I found that Lyme disease, people with chronic Lyme disease have a very high potential to get well, if they just do the right stuff.
Is there an easy way to describe the diet that you do? Is there one diet that you recommend for everyone, or do they have to determine that on their own?
It does vary from person to person. And with the protocols that we do, we have a stepwise fashion, because 75% of people with any chronic illness, Lyme disease included, will have a wrecked gut. And so you have to address gut issues of slow motility and poor digestion. So we have a protocol that, basically I've been working with people for years, and I basically cut out all the foods that contributed to gastrointestinal symptoms, and started with that, cut out oxalates and lectins and, all the things that were harmful. It's a pretty narrow diet. Most people only stay on that for a couple of weeks, but some people need it for months or even a year to get that GI tract restored. But ultimately, my basic guidelines for diet are feed your cells what they need, right? And so I really only have 4 basic guidelines for diet. The first is eat whole foods as much as you can. Whole foods are whole cells, right? An apple has a lot of carbohydrate in it, but the carbohydrate is all contained inside cells. Those cells, the fats and carbohydrates and proteins that the cell is made of, includes all the vitamins and minerals and everything that your cells need to function. So a whole food diet, whole foods, whole cells, whole piece of salmon, whole broccoli. As much as you can do that, it's really important, because that is very different than raw carbohydrate that's been extracted from a seed source, flour. Not that you can't ever have that, but lean more toward whole foods. Second is eat more vegetables than anything else. This is such a hard one for most people. I don't know why. I love vegetables, and it's just really, vegetables. The problem with vegetables, they don't have carbohydrate and fat in them for very much, and that's what drives our taste buds. And so a stick of broccoli, a plain stick of broccoli, just doesn't taste good to us. And so you have to doctor vegetables up, adding carbohydrates and fat and making like a pie dish, or it's like butter on broccoli makes it more palatable because we're used to that fat or carbohydrate. But vegetables have the fiber that your digestive tract needs to function properly. For years we've been telling people eat fiber, and they're talking about grain fiber, bran. That's the worst thing you can put in your GI tract. Your GI tract needs vegetable fiber, and there's just no way around it. It needs that, and it needs a lot of it. You look at our ancestral foods. For hundreds of thousands of years, humans were foragers. They ate foraged food that included about 2/3 plant matter, but it was wild plants. They were loaded with fiber, but not much in calories, so they had to eat a lot of it. And they ate wild game, which didn't have much fat. So they had to eat a lot of plant matter, and they were getting lots and lots of fiber. And that's what our digestive tract is designed for. And that's what our cells are primed for. Our cells are designed to run lean. We just don't need that much carbohydrate and fat to survive. So vegetables. And once you've got that half vegetables, divide it up however you want. You can eat meat, just don't eat tons of meat. You can eat nuts, you can, whatever you tolerate. That can be different. 75% of the foods that I was eating, I was sensitive to. I had bad nut and grain sensitivities because I had been eating a lot of that sort of thing. And certain foods like nuts and certain grains like wheat have a higher tendency to cause food sensitivities. So I had to cut out a lot of stuff. But most people tolerate most vegetables, and most people tolerate most meat pretty well. So just dividing it up, what you can eat. The third thing that I follow that I think is really important is I keep control of my carbohydrate. I don't go ketogenic. I don't think you need to go ketogenic to be well. In fact, some people don't do well with a ketogenic diet at all, especially if they have wasting. They need some calories. And, grains like rice. Rice is a very well tolerated grain, and sometimes people need that just to get the calories. But I try to keep my total carbohydrate count for me as a 65-year-old adult down below 150 grams a day. Most Americans, probably most Australians, are 300 plus. That's a lot of carbohydrate, and it's a lot more than your body needs to function. But, again, if someone has wasting and they're just not absorbing calories, they may need to eat more than that. And the fourth thing is intermittent fasting. What intermittent fasting does is optimizes something called autophagy, AUTOPAGY. Autophagy is the ability of cells to restore themselves. And there are certain things that optimize autophagy. And again, autophagy is the process by which our cells expel microbes. So we really want to optimize autophagy. And one way to do that is shortening your eating window. So the less you eat, the longer you fast without eating anything, the more you optimize autophagy. So if you don't eat for 12 hours, you're doing a pretty good job of optimizing autophagy. If you're not eating if you only eat like a 6-hour window or an 8-hour window, it's even better. So maximum autophagy occurs at 16 hours of fasting. So if you're eating 8 hours out of 24 and leaving 16, your gut's going to work better, and you're going to optimize autophagy. That can be hard for certain people. If you're really struggling, that may be hard. You may be only able to do 12 hours. That's okay. I don't have any problem with that. So varying it is just fine. There are other ways to optimize autophagy. Exercise and sauna optimize autophagy. Herbs optimize autophagy as well as anything you can do. So it's really a very important part of cellular wellness. Doing those things can really matter. And certainly people would ask, well, why not just keep fasting? Because that's really going to optimize autophagy. It does. And healthy people doing a 2 or 3 day fast, I think it's fine, but you get diminishing returns. All right. So what autophagy is your cells are pruning worn out proteins, worn out mitochondria, digesting those parts and recirculating them, rebuilding the cell. So after about 16 hours of not having any food, your cells start cannibalizing their own parts just to generate energy. So after that 16-hour point, you may optimize autophagy more, but the longer you fast after that, the more you get diminishing returns that it's actually hurting cellular wellness. So fasting more than like 2 or 3 days just isn't a good idea for anyone. And it's and people that are struggling with a chronic illness, your cells are already stressed pretty bad. You really don't need them to stress them with excessive autophagy.
So we've got diet, and I think that they could probably find guidance on the herbs from your books and website.
Yeah.
And exercise is pretty clear about the cleansing. Is there anything else that we haven't touched on that would be important for people to, just take this and run with it if they're resonating?
Yeah, clean environment. I know a lot of people in a lot of places deal with mold, and that's always frustrating. And they get sent on these really elaborate protocols of using binders, which I don't think are appropriate, and doing mycotoxin testing, which has been found to be notoriously inaccurate. The solution for mold is find it in your environment and get rid of it. And when you get rid of it, your body will purge. And I know about these things because I ended up stuck in a moldy office building that had mold growing in the wallboard and underneath, but every time I could get away from the office, like for a weekend or a week, I'd start feeling better, and I could tell, that I was purging it. So if you're doing all the things to move blood and immobilize these things, you'll get rid of the mycotoxins too, but you do have to get rid of them, get rid of them in the environment. But also just minimizing other toxic things. We're just so exposed to such high levels of toxic substances, herbicides, pesticides, et cetera, in our food, in our air, in our water, and minimizing those things as much as possible. Organic food, whenever it's practical, filtered water, being careful about skin products because they're all petroleum based, or many of them, and using natural things as a substitute. Air is harder, but using air filters in homes can be really important. So that's important. Sleep is hard for a lot of people. That was my big thing. I lost the ability to sleep, and it took me years to regain that. Interestingly, it wasn't drugs, it wasn't herbs, it wasn't other things that helped me to sleep. Things that I was trying to use to put me to sleep didn't work. It was the antimicrobial herbs. The longer that I used them, the better my sleep got. And the fact of the matter is, just hard to sleep when your brain's on fire, and you put out the fire and you start sleeping normally again. Mm-hmm. Moving blood, again, sauna is just really super important. So that core, everybody is chasing therapies. They're doing ozone and hypothermia and all of these. And I can explain why some of those things have some value, but it's not what people do to you. It's the choices you make yourself that are going to make the most difference. A good core of herbs, really paying attention to your diet, trying to get as much sleep as you can, clean up your environment, and move, even if that's something like just doing Tai Chi or yoga or just walking around your house. Moving blood is really, really important in this recovery. And if you can't do that, or if you want to add in sauna along with that, those things are just remarkably important. If you're doing that baseline, that foundation, there's at least a 50% chance you're not going to need anything else. And if you do, you're going to need a whole lot less of it.
And do people have a Herx or a cleansing response on herbs, like sometimes they do with antibiotics?
They can, and everybody's different. And I don't look at Herxheimers the same way that a lot of people do. I look on it more as an intensification of the war. And so when you're introducing therapy, whether it's antibiotics or herbs, anything that's killing the microbes is also killing weak cells. So you end up with not only dead microbes, but more importantly, dead cells and debris and congestion around that cellular space. That is what inflammation is, right? And the body sends in garbage collectors called macrophages to clean all that dead debris and congestion and dead cells and all of this stuff up. And what they use is potent acid and free radicals to break down all that junk. Well, that in itself can be harmful. It ends up being this toxic stew. So whatever therapy you're introducing, often what you're doing is just intensifying that. So it's not a classic just killing the microbes and dead microbes. It's dead cells, it's congestion, it's debris. And herbs, because they have antioxidants and other things that are battling inflammation, then taking things like krill oil supplements in addition, turmeric in addition. A lot of people find that using Alka-Seltzer Gold, which is basically bicarbonate, which neutralizes the free radicals associated with the inflammation, that can really help, or alkalized water. So there are a lot of ways that you can minimize this. But it doesn't tend to be quite as bad with a Herxheimer because the herbs are helping neutralize some of the effects of it. And you're not having the kill and die off of so many other kind of bacteria in your body. So it's not killing all your normal flora and everything else too.
I think my internet did something funny there. Apologies to anybody watching this. And so is there anything I've neglected to ask that'd be important? Like, if do they just go to your website? How do you recommend someone get started in their own journey for self-healing and self-recovery?
The only thing complicated about the herbs is it's not just like a little bottle. It's not like a little tincture of herbs and you take, 10 drops of this and you're going to be great. It's high concentrations of herbs. I mean, I literally had a shoebox full of herbs of high concentration standardized extracts and tinctures. And so it's complicated. You do have to take a wide range of herbs and other support ingredients to really get where you need to be. One of the things that I did as a physician, I ended up stopping my medical practice because I could reach people so much better just by talking to them with consults and creating protocols. So I wrote a book in 2017 that really defines all of that basic recovery. My recent book is less Lyme disease, but it still has a lot of great information. The first book was Unlocking Lyme. The second book is The Cellular Wellness Solution. In addition to that, you mentioned that I started a supplement company with my daughter. The whole purpose of that was creating supplement protocols to make the supplement arm of that thing so much easier. So instead of taking lots of different supplements, it's, I got it down as much as I could, and it's still 4 bottles of stuff, and it's really super high concentrated. So people are getting a lot within that. So that is a protocol called the Restore Kit that a lot of people have used. We've literally had over 10,000 people use it now. And surveys over the years that we've done looking at the response is about 70% of people within 6 months have significant reduction in their symptoms. But again, you have to be persistent with it. And a lot of people, fall off the wagon, stop taking the herbs, and then go chasing other things, and they never really get well. It's persistence. And again, I've been taking herbs. I don't take the quantities. I took really high concentrations of herbs and other support nutrients like B vitamins to support methylation and glutathione and other kinds of things. I did that for well over 5 years. But so my daily regimen is much simpler now. But again, I've been taking herbs continually for 15 years. Mm. And the good news is at 65, I'm doing things that I thought I would never do again. And I'm still kite surfing and other things. I mean, I was diagnosed with essential hypertension when I was in my 30s. My blood pressure was always high. Couldn't take any of the drugs because of all the side effects they caused. I finally just decided to ignore it. Then all these years of taking the herbs, my blood pressure went to normal. My cholesterol is better than when I was in my 40s. And I'm just not aging at the same rate as other people that I see around me. So the herbs are doing a lot of things. And so it's pretty cool looking back on it, just to see how much benefit of different varieties that I've gotten from this pathway.
It's such an empowering thing. You know, I think I mentioned to you that I was a former ICU nurse, and when I discovered that, you know, I knew that we were doing a good thing in critical care, obviously, like you said at the beginning. But then when I started to learn, I had a chronic illness before Lyme as well, and I started to learn more about the body and that cellular. If our cells don't have everything, there's no way. That's the first place to start. If we don't have our cells in order, then the house is going to fall down, basically. And, you know, so refreshing to be able to, you know, I know it's hard for people because I've helped people for many years. It's hard for them to take self-responsibility, but it is the way forward for healthcare. And I'm looking forward to the transformation in healthcare that growing numbers of people with this kind of education can do, and taking the power back into their own hands. So Dr. Rawls, what would you like to leave people with today in regards to going forth towards better health and recovery?
You know, I think what you just said is so important, is taking responsibility for our own health, accountability. And I think people tend to shy away from that because it opens up the door for failure. You know, if you go and contract a doctor to take care of you and the therapy fails, it's that person's the fault. But if you take responsibility and it doesn't work out, then you failed. And a lot of people have a hard time with that. But again, I firmly believe that wellness occurs mostly outside of a doctor's office. And so much what we do in conventional medicine, functional medicine, we make this path to wellness much more complicated than it needs to be. And some of that is done on purpose because that's, you know, that's how you make a living. It's just not that hard. If you take care of one cell in your body, if you do what is necessary to keep one cell in your body healthy, you're taking care of every cell in your body. And that includes protection of microbes and feeding into your cells properly and everything else. All your cells need the same thing. Focus on that and you'll get your life back.
Yeah, and it's also taking back, you know, we're gaslit in medicine, right? We disempower people. Why did you go and take independent action yourself? You need to listen to me, the doctor or the nurse or whatever. And I think just like Lyme, this same topic is critical for turning around healthcare into something that helps people thrive.
No doubt, no doubt. Like I said, you know, the things that I've said apply to everything, absolutely every chronic illness. And it's, you know, and what we're doing is a failure. I mean, I know in the United States, we're spending more on healthcare than ever before. And as we're doing that right now, the CDC in America defines that 60% of the American population are suffering from some kind of chronic illness. And that's gone up every single year or every decade for the past 30 decades or 3 decades. It keeps rising. And, you know, they shout the successes. More people are living from cancer. We've got all these innovative cancer therapies. The incidence of cancer is going up and up and up. I mean, come on, you're doing nothing to prevent it.
Yeah.
And, you know, and so, yeah, people need to start taking responsibility for themselves. And when we do that, we start making better use of the healthcare system. It
Absolutely.
becomes responsible again.
Yeah. Dr. Rawls, you're a genuine pioneer, and thank you for what you do. And thank you for your generous gift to the Australian Lyme community.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you so much.